Hey there everybody, I'm Radical Dreamer, and welcome to the preview of The Outcast, Episode 3. The Outcast is a podcast done by myself and two other Japanese-speaking gamers living here, in Japan. In this edition, we look into the release of Final Fantasy XIII in America, and the release of Yakuza 3 in America, and its new counterpart, Yakuza 4, here in Japan. The preview I'm about to show you is a little bit of our conversation on Final Fantasy XIII as it pertains to game design in general, and linearity, amongst other criticisms the game has received. Please go to our website, theoutcastpodcast.blogspot.com, or click the link in the box in the corner, if you would like to hear more.
I believe the topic at hand was linearity
of Final Fantasy XIII.
Final Fantasy XIII. And I'm curious, when on earth did linearity become a bad word?
When
was the first time you heard it used as a bad word?
I heard Final Fantasy VII, even back then, they had qualms with its linearity, even then.
Yeah, and then it took off, and once it took off, it became mythic.
FF10 was when it was big. Linearity is like, it's a good game, but it's too linear. I think around the year 2000, 2001.
Yeah, I remember even back then I was a little mad at the fact. It wasn't really that we lost a world map that I didn't like about 10, it was that we lost the ability to fly around in the airship.
Right.
Like, I would have been happy just being able to fly around. I missed that.
And I mean, look, I don't work for Square Enix, or do I? Well, I work for a company, but yeah, I think a lot of their reasoning behind the linearity came from, as they've said themselves, technical limitations. They've just built this engine that's it's the biggest undertaking in probably the JRPG, among any JRPG maker for a HD game. And they've admitted that to make the game with full-on towns and everything was just not within the scope of this game. So it's not like they originally meant to have the towns in there and cut them. These are things that are projected ahead of schedule. They would have realised that they couldn't have done towns. So I think that would have had an impact on the plot. Not after they wrote the plot, but as they were writing it.
They're like, all right, this is what we can do.
Yeah.
If we want to get the biggest variety of locations, then we want to spend time on those locations, not on towns, basically.
Agreed. I think it's not like we're missing anything. This was how the game was designed. It plays well, it flows well.
Okay, and I should point this out because I know somebody else will if I don't. Yes, there was the interview with the art director of Final Fantasy XIII who said that, an entire disc worth, kind of material had been cut. I just wanted to say that that's normal for any game. That's normal. You have to remember that lots of stuff ends up on the cutting room floor. And the stuff that he mentioned in that interview was, I believe, Lightning's house, the HQ for Snow's little
band
group,
of dudes, yeah.
A theme park attachment to Nautilus.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But again, none of that is towns. Like don't infer that there were cuts, therefore towns must be cut.
Towns were not planned
to
be there.
Planned.
No,
there's a difference between a cut and never
this,
planned.
as you said, it's part of the process. I mean, I have seen. How much of this can I say? I have seen mecha designs, which have never and will never be released for games that were never made by certain companies, and they blow my mind away. And I saw them in a random meeting once. They were done by artists I've known of since I was in junior high. It's like, wow, I wish this game had been made, but it never will. And there was a lot of awesome stuff made for it. And that was for a game that never got greenlit. So if we look at games that are greenlit, all the stuff that goes into the games before they even start making a single graphical asset, they trim, they cut,
and
they
you have
go
to
through
understand.
betas.
Yeah, and also things like this. You have to understand, why were those locations cut? They were cut because they didn't fit the streamlined message that the game wanted to present. Now, I want you to just think of a DVD. Any DVD you own, because it does have the cut scenes section.
Right.
How often are those cut scenes things you really wanted integrated back into the movie? Usually never. Usually there's something that didn't really help.
Yeah.
They're all... Yeah, exactly. And that's the main reason that, even in games, it's the same thing. Did we need that location for the overall game story?
Right.
No, we didn't. And therefore it was cut to save time, to save money, to get the game into your hands in a way that the developers were proud of.
It seems that people have just tacked this tag of linearity onto the game in this really negative context where it doesn't need to be. And what was interesting was recently I saw a review for God of War 3. And that review said, well, the game's relatively short. It's about 10 hours, and it's really linear, as are all the God of War games, but it's fun.
Isn't that enough?
Last I remembered, Final Fantasy XIII was fun.
Yeah,
so why is the linearity a bad thing?
People have, I think, a attachment to the past when it comes to the Final Fantasy series. Oh, there used to be this world map and all these things to explore. I want you to think back on this. What was the world map? It was a corridor between two towns.
Right.
Even worse than that, it was a corridor between two towns with literally nothing in it. You just would get sucked into battles.
Mm-hmm.
Now the corridors actually just happen to look like corridors.
Random battles, or you'd meet Yuffie.
Oh, yeah. But that's what I'm saying is the world map was just a trick to make it feel like you had freedom.
You were still going from point A to point B.
But really, yeah, it was still just a corridor. The thing is, I think people are very attached to that illusion. And maybe that is important to a game. That if you don't think it's linear, then, maybe it isn't. And maybe that's what people are thinking.
Possibly, yeah.
If people want to know any more of my thoughts, you can check the Outcast page or my page on Bitmob, where I put an article, tongue-in-cheek article, about how linearity is perceived, especially when you look back at what are considered the all-time great games, from Pong to Metal Gear.